My name is Beverly, and I'm 32 years old. Right now, I'm standing in the mahogany paneled office of Manhattan's most exclusive wedding venue, watching through floor to ceiling windows as my sister Marlene steps out of a white limousine in her $1,000 wedding dress. 9 years ago, she laughed at my candle business and called it a cute hobby. Today, she has no idea that I own the venue where she's about to walk down the aisle. Where are you watching from today? Hit that like button and subscribe because this story will show you that sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply success itself. I was born into what you'd call a typical middle-class family in Queens, New York. My father, Frank, 55, worked as an accountant for a small firm pulling in about $60,000 a year. My mother, Georgia, 52, was a registered nurse at the local hospital, adding another $45,000 to our household income. We lived in a 3-bedroom ranch house with a mortgage that kept my parents awake at night, but we were comfortable enough. Then there was my sister Marlene, 3 years younger than me, who seemed to be born under a different star entirely. From the moment she could walk, everything came easily to her. She was the child who got piano lessons at 6 ballet classes at 8 and private tutoring when her grades dipped below an A-. I watched from the sidelines as my parents invested in her potential like day traders, betting on a sure thing. The differences between us became apparent early. Marlene was everything a parent could want in a daughter. She was beautiful with the kind of blonde hair that caught light perfectly, and blue eyes that made adults stop and compliment my mother on her gorgeous child. She was popular at school, dating the quarterback by junior year, and had a natural charm that made teachers and coaches alike want to help her succeed. I, on the other hand, was what you might call an acquired taste. I had mousy brown hair that never cooperated, preferred reading to socializing, and found genuine joy in creating things with my hands. While Marlene was at cheerleading practice, I was in my bedroom making friendship bracelets or trying to perfect origami cranes. My passion for crafts, particularly making scented candles, started when I was 16 and found an old candle-making kit at a garage sale. The financial disparity in how my parents treated us was stark and painful. Marlene's education cost them $40,000 a year when she enrolled at NYU for business administration. She got a brand new Honda Civic for her 18th birthday and a studio apartment near campus that cost $2,400 a month. Meanwhile, I attended the local community college for art therapy, working 25 hours a week at a coffee shop just to cover my tuition and gas money for the beat-up Toyota Camry I'd bought with my own savings. Family dinners became exercises in comparison. Georgia would beam as she recounted Marlene's latest achievements, her voice filled with pride as she told anyone who would listen about her daughter's internship at a marketing firm or her dean's list recognition. Frank would nod approvingly and talk about Marlene's bright future, her business acumen, her drive to succeed in the corporate world. When conversations turned to me, the tone shifted noticeably. My parents would ask when I planned to get serious about my future, when I would stop playing around with arts and crafts and focus on building a real career. They meant well, I think, but their disappointment was palpable every time I mentioned my growing interest in candle making or my dream of starting my own business. The breaking point came when I was 23 and decided to turn my hobby into something more. I had been making candles for years, experimenting with different wax blends and essential oil combinations, creating unique scents that friends constantly complimented. I had saved up $500 from my coffee shop job and wanted to invest it in starting a small candle business from our garage. The family reaction was swift and unanimous. Frank called it a waste of time and money, insisting I should focus on finding a stable job with benefits. Georgia worried that I was being unrealistic about the challenges of entrepreneurship. But it was Marlene's response that cut the deepest. She actually laughed when I explained my business plan, and said with a condescending smile that candle making wasn't a business, it was a hobby for housewives with too much time on their hands. That moment crystallized everything I had been feeling for years. I was the daughter who would never be enough, never be successful enough, never be worthy of the same investment and support that Marlene received automatically. But instead of discouraging me, their dismissal lit something inside me that burned brighter than any candle I had ever made. Starting my business with $500 was like trying to build a house with a handful of nails and a prayer. I spent weeks researching suppliers, comparing prices on soy wax, beeswax, and paraffin blends. I drove to craft stores 40 minutes away to find better deals on essential oils and wick supplies. Every penny counted when you're trying to prove that your dream isn't just a waste of time. My setup was humble, to put it kindly. I cleared out half of our cluttered garage, setting up folding tables from garage sales as my workstations. I bought used glass containers from thrift stores and spent hours cleaning them until they sparkled. My first batch of candles included 12 different scents, from lavender vanilla to something I ambitiously called Manhattan Midnight, a blend of sandalwood and bergamot that I thought captured the essence of the city. The work was backbreaking. I would clock in at the coffee shop at 6 in the morning, serve lattes and croissants to rushed commuters until 2 in the afternoon, then come home and work on candles until nearly midnight. Melting wax, mixing scents, pouring candles, labeling containers, photographing products for my basic website. My hands were constantly stained with dye, and I smelled perpetually of whatever fragrance I had been working with that day. My first month in business was a harsh lesson in reality. I sold exactly 12 candles, mostly to coworkers at the coffee shop who bought them out of pity. After factoring in materials, website hosting, and the small display case I had rented at a local craft fair, I was $200 in the hole. My parents saw this as confirmation of their predictions, and Frank started leaving job listings from the newspaper on my bedroom door. But Marlene's reaction was worse than financial disappointment. She started bringing friends over specifically to see what she called my cute little hobby setup in the garage. She would give tours like I was a zoo exhibit, pointing out my makeshift workspace and explaining to her perfectly manicured friends that her sister was going through a phase where she thought she could make money playing with wax. The mockery escalated as Marlene's own career began to take off. At 24, she landed a marketing coordinator position at a mid-sized advertising agency with a starting salary of $65,000. The announcement came during a family dinner where she casually mentioned her promotion, while I was describing my plans to approach local boutiques about carrying my candles. The contrast was deliberate and painful. Georgia immediately started planning a celebration dinner for Marlene's success, while simultaneously asking me when I planned to get serious about my future. Frank opened a bottle of wine he had been saving and toasted his daughter's achievement, then turned to me and suggested that maybe it was time to follow Marlene's example and pursue something more stable. That same week, I had worked up the courage to present my parents with a detailed business plan, complete with market research and financial projections. I had spent weeks putting together a proposal for a $5,000 family investment that would allow me to expand my product line and rent proper commercial space. The presentation lasted exactly 8 minutes before Frank politely but firmly declined, explaining that they needed to be responsible with their money and couldn't afford to fund what he called speculative ventures. 2 days later, they gave Marlene $15,000 as a housewarming gift for her new apartment in Brooklyn Heights. The rejection stung, but it also clarified something important. I was completely on my own in this venture, which meant every success would be entirely mine. I doubled down on my efforts, taking on weekend cleaning jobs to raise additional capital. I spent my free time researching competitors, analyzing what made certain candles successful, and developing signature scent profiles that I hoped would set my products apart. My breakthrough came in month 6, when the owner of a boutique in Park Slope agreed to try 50 of my candles on consignment. She loved my Brooklyn Heights blend, a sophisticated mix of cedar and sea salt that supposedly captured the essence of the upscale neighborhood. Within 2 weeks, she was asking for a standing order of 200 candles per month. Suddenly, I was making enough money to quit my second cleaning job. My monthly revenue hit $2,000, and for the first time I could see a path forward that didn't involve serving coffee or scrubbing other people's bathrooms. But when I shared this milestone with my family, Marlene's response was to ask when this phase would finally end so I could focus on building a real career. Year 2 of my business marked the beginning of something I hadn't dared to hope for actual growth. I launched an Etsy store and started taking custom orders online, which opened up markets far beyond New York City. My signature scent collection expanded to include Central Park Dawn, a fresh blend of juniper and morning dew and Soho evening, a sophisticated combination of amber and black tea that became my bestseller. The numbers were starting to add up in ways that surprised even me. By month 18, I was generating $15,000 in monthly revenue, enough to finally quit my coffee shop job and focus on candle making full-time. I had outgrown the garage and rented a small commercial space in an industrial area of Queens, complete with proper ventilation and enough room to store inventory. My success came with an unexpected side effect. It made family gatherings even more uncomfortable. Marlene had started dating Richard, a 31-year-old finance professional who worked on Wall Street and drove a BMW that cost more than most people's annual salaries. Their relationship became the centerpiece of every family conversation, with Georgia and Frank hanging on every detail of their upscale dates and weekend trips to the Hamptons. When asked about my work, I would mention my growing client base or my latest wholesale contracts, but these achievements were consistently minimized or dismissed. Georgia would smile politely and ask when I planned to meet someone nice like Richard. Frank would nod and suggest that maybe it was time to think about scaling back the candle business and focusing on finding a husband and starting a family. The contrast in how my parents treated our respective accomplishments was stark. When Marlene mentioned getting a raise to $75,000, Frank took the family out to dinner at an expensive steakhouse. When I shared that I had landed a contract to supply custom candles for a boutique hotel chain, Georgia asked if I was sure I wasn't taking on too much and suggested I be careful not to overextend myself. Year 3 brought the kind of growth that changed everything. I had connected with several interior designers who started incorporating my candles into their high-end residential projects. Wedding planners began reaching out for custom ceremony candles, and corporate clients wanted signature scents for their offices and retail spaces. My revenue jumped to $45,000 per month, and I was able to hire my first 2 employees. The hotel chain contract alone was worth 6 figures annually. They wanted custom candles for their lobby suites and spa facilities across 12 locations with exclusive scents that would become part of their brand identity. It was the kind of deal that transformed my business from a successful small operation to something approaching a real company. But my family's perception of my work remained unchanged. During Marlene's engagement party, a lavish affair at a country club that cost more than I had made in my first year of business, I overheard Georgia explaining to relatives that I was still doing my little candle thing, but that she hoped I would eventually find something more stable. The engagement itself was a production worthy of a reality show. Richard proposed at Le Bernardin, the 4-star restaurant in Midtown, with a $25,000 Tiffany solitaire that caught light like a small star. Marlene's Instagram post about the proposal got 3,000 likes, and she immediately began planning what she called the wedding of the century. My parents committed $50,000 to the wedding budget without blinking, the same amount they had refused to invest in my business plan 3 years earlier. They took over the dining room table with wedding magazines and vendor catalogs, discussing flowers and catering and photographers with the intensity of military strategists planning a campaign. I wasn't included in these planning sessions. When I asked if I could help with anything, Marlene sweetly suggested that I might be good at making place cards or other crafty details since I was so good with my hands. The dismissal was casual, but cutting, reducing years of business building to a hobby suitable for arts and crafts projects. What they didn't know was that my little candle thing had evolved into something much bigger. I had quietly purchased my first investment property, a small building in an up-and-coming neighborhood that I planned to convert into a flagship retail space. My business was now valued at just over $2 million, and I was in talks with a private equity firm about potential expansion funding. But I kept these developments to myself, partly out of a growing realization that my family's approval was something I no longer needed or wanted. Their inability to see my success had stopped hurting and started feeling like their loss rather than mine. The wedding venue search consumed Marlene's life for the better part of 6 months. She visited every high-end location in Manhattan, from historic hotels to modern event spaces, each with its own set of requirements and astronomical price tags. Her standards were impossibly high, which made sense given that she saw this wedding as the social event that would establish her place in Richard's wealthy social circle. After touring 15 venues and rejecting each one for various reasons, she finally settled on the Meridian, an ultra-luxury wedding venue on the Upper East Side that catered exclusively to New York's elite. The space was genuinely spectacular with marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. The booking fee alone was $95,000, with a 2-year waiting list that Marlene somehow managed to circumvent through Richard's family connections. The venue choice became another opportunity for my family to emphasize the differences between Marlene's success and my ongoing hobby phase. Georgia would describe the Meridian in breathless detail to anyone who would listen, emphasizing that only the most successful families could afford to host events there. Frank took obvious pride in being able to contribute to such an expensive celebration, seeing it as proof of his family's upward mobility. Meanwhile, my business continued its rapid expansion in ways that even I found surprising. Years 5 and 6 brought international orders, a subscription box service that generated recurring revenue and licensing deals with major retailers. I had developed an online candle-making course that brought in passive income, and my team had grown to 15 employees working out of a proper facility in Long Island City. My monthly revenue had reached $200,000, but I maintained my modest lifestyle and continued attending family dinners where Marlene would update everyone on wedding planning details, while I nodded politely and asked appropriate questions. The cognitive dissonance was surreal sitting at my childhood dinner table, listening to my sister stress about choosing between $2,000 photographers, while my phone buzzed with notifications about 6-figure wholesale orders. The opportunity to purchase the Meridian came through my network of wedding industry contacts. The elderly owner, a man named Harold Steinberg, who had built the business over 30 years, wanted to retire and was quietly seeking a buyer who would maintain the venue's reputation and standards. The asking price was $12 million, a number that would have been impossible to imagine when I was mixing my first batch of candles in the garage. But my business was now valued at $8 million, and I had developed relationships with investors who were interested in expanding into the luxury events market. I assembled a consortium that included 2 private equity partners and a luxury hospitality group, raising $15 million to purchase the Meridian and fund renovations that would integrate my candle brand into the venue experience. The acquisition process took 3 months and required absolute secrecy. Harold insisted on discretion to avoid spooking his existing clients, and I was happy to comply since it meant my family would remain unaware of the purchase until I decided to reveal it. The paperwork was completed through a shell company, and the existing staff was retained with minimal changes to their daily operations. My new business model centered on creating an integrated luxury experience where custom candle scents would be part of every event's ambiance. Couples could work with my team to develop signature fragrances for their ceremonies, and corporate clients could create branded scents for their gatherings. It was an innovative approach that differentiated the Meridian from other high-end venues while showcasing my products in the perfect setting. As Marlene's wedding approached, she became increasingly demanding and stressed about every detail. She treated the venue staff with casual rudeness, changed her mind about arrangements multiple times, and generally behaved like someone who believed that spending enough money entitled her to treat service workers poorly. I watched this behavior through security cameras and staff reports, feeling a mixture of embarrassment and anticipation for what was coming. The final guest count reached 200 people with a total event cost approaching $150,000. Richard's family had flown in from Europe, and the guest list included several minor celebrities and business leaders whose presence would be photographed and posted across social media. For Marlene, this wedding represented the culmination of everything she had worked towards: social status, financial security, and recognition as someone who had made it in New York's competitive landscape. 3 days before the wedding, as final preparations were being completed, Marlene made one last cutting remark about my career during a family dinner. She mentioned that she was grateful that at least someone in the family knew what real success looked like, a comment that was clearly directed at me and my continued involvement in what she still saw as a hobby business. I smiled and agreed that success was indeed something worth celebrating, knowing that in 72 hours, she would discover exactly what success actually looked like. Wedding day arrived with the crisp clarity that October in New York provides, the kind of weather that makes even cynics believe in fairy tale endings. I arrived at the Meridian at 6 in the morning, 3 hours before the vendor teams, and 4 hours before Marlene's scheduled arrival for hair and makeup. As the venue owner, I wanted to personally oversee every detail of what would undoubtedly be the most expensive and elaborate event my family had ever experienced. The setup was flawless, a testament to the professional team I had inherited with the venue purchase. The main ballroom was transformed with thousands of white roses, crystal candelabras, and strategically placed candles from my signature collection. The scent profile I had selected, a subtle blend of white tea and bergamot, called Park Avenue Elegance, filled the space with an understated luxury that complemented the flowers without overwhelming the senses. From my office on the mezzanine level, I had a perfect view of the entire venue through both windows and security monitors. I watched as florists put finishing touches on centerpieces, as caterers arranged elaborate displays in the prep kitchen, and as photographers tested lighting angles for the ceremony space. Every vendor was someone I had personally selected based on their reputation and professionalism, ensuring that despite my family's behavior, this would be an event worthy of the venue's reputation. Marlene arrived at 10:30 in a convoy of black SUVs surrounded by 6 bridesmaids, and our mother, all of them chattering excitedly as they were escorted to the bridal suite. Through the security system, I watched Georgia fuss over Marlene's dress, while professional hair and makeup artists worked their magic. The energy was infectious, and despite everything, I found myself hoping that Marlene would have the perfect day she had been planning for 2 years. The ceremony portion went off without a single problem. Richard looked genuinely happy as he waited at the altar, and Marlene was radiant as she walked down the aisle on Frank's arm. Their vows were personal and heartfelt, bringing tears to guests who clearly cared about the couple. For those 20 minutes, the venue felt filled with genuine love and celebration, exactly what I had envisioned when I purchased the space. But as guests moved from the ceremony space to the cocktail hour, the problems began. Marlene, still in her wedding dress, but now with the imperious attitude of someone who believed she was the most important person in the building, approached the venue's front desk with her first complaint of the evening. She was unhappy with the candle scents in the cocktail area, insisting they smelled amateur and unprofessional. When the desk manager politely explained that the candles were from Beverly Candle Company, a premium brand specifically chosen for the venue, Marlene's response was immediate and dismissive. She had never heard of the company and assumed they were some cheap knockoff brand that was beneath the standards of a venue like the Meridian. That was my cue. I had been waiting in my office watching the evening unfold through security cameras, while reviewing business emails and pretending this was just another Saturday night event. But hearing Marlene disparage my company, my life's work, while standing in the venue I owned, was the moment I had been anticipating for months. I straightened my black business suit, checked my appearance in the office mirror, and walked downstairs to the main floor. The click of my heels on the marble floor echoed through the lobby as I approached the front desk, where Marlene was still lecturing the staff about acceptable standards for luxury events. She saw me approaching, and her expression shifted from annoyance to confusion. "Beverly, what are you doing here? Are you working as staff tonight?" The questions came with the same condescending tone she had used when discussing my candle hobby for the past 9 years. The assumption that I could only be present in a service capacity. I handed her my business card, a thick cream-colored piece of cardstock with elegant lettering, Beverly Thompson, owner, and Chief Executive Officer, The Meridian. I watched her face as she read the words, confusion giving way to disbelief as the implications became clear. "That's not possible," she said, her voice rising slightly. "This venue costs $95,000 just for the rental fee." the math didn't compute in her worldview, where I was still the sister playing with candles in the garage, the family member who couldn't be trusted with real responsibility. $95,000, I confirmed with a smile. Thank you for choosing the Meridian for your special day. Your payment helped fund our recent office renovations. By now, guests nearby had stopped their conversations to listen. Frank and Georgia appeared at Marlene's side, drawn by the commotion and the sight of their daughters talking intensely near the front desk. The confusion on their faces mirrored Marlene's as they tried to process why I was dressed professionally and holding what appeared to be an official conversation with wedding venue staff. Richard joined the group, his business-trained mind immediately grasping the situation's implications, even as my parents struggled to understand what was happening. He looked from my business card to my confident posture, to the obvious deference of the venue staff, and I saw recognition dawn in his eyes before anyone else's. The explanation came in simple factual terms. My candle business, the hobby they had all dismissed for nearly a decade, was now a $15 million company with international distribution and corporate partnerships. I had purchased the Meridian 6 months earlier as part of my expansion into the luxury events market. The venue where they were celebrating Marlene's wedding, the space that represented the pinnacle of New York social success in their minds, belonged to me. The immediate reaction was chaos. Marlene accused me of trying to upstage her on her wedding day, as if my business success was somehow a personal attack on her celebration. Frank demanded to know why I had never told them about the extent of my success, his voice carrying the wounded pride of a father who realized he had been wrong about his daughter for years. Georgia stood speechless, her worldview of successful versus unsuccessful daughters completely inverted in the span of 30 seconds. But it was Richard's reaction that surprised me most. Instead of being defensive about his wife's family drama playing out in public, he seemed genuinely impressed and immediately started asking intelligent questions about my business model and expansion strategy. Here was someone who understood the difference between inherited wealth and earned success, and he clearly recognized that what I had built was far more impressive than anything Marlene had achieved in her corporate career. The scene was unfolding in front of 200 wedding guests, many of whom had their phones out and were recording what was clearly becoming a viral moment. Within hours, videos of the confrontation would be posted across social media platforms with captions like, "Bride discovers sister owns her wedding venue," and "Plot twist at luxury wedding." The story would eventually reach business media outlets and generate more publicity for my company than any paid advertising campaign could have achieved. As I stood there in my own venue, surrounded by my employees, and watching my family grapple with a reality they had never imagined possible, I felt something I hadn't expected, not satisfaction or vindication, but a profound sense of completion. This moment wasn't about proving them wrong or getting revenge for years of dismissal. It was about finally fully stepping into the person I had become, despite their lack of support, rather than because of it. The immediate aftermath of the revelation created ripple effects that extended far beyond the wedding reception. Within 24 hours, multiple videos of the confrontation had gone viral across TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter, accumulating over 2 million views and generating thousands of comments from viewers who were either applauding my success or criticizing the family dynamics they had witnessed. The media attention was unlike anything I had experienced. Business journalists picked up the story as an example of entrepreneurial perseverance with headlines like "Millennial Entrepreneur's Sweet Revenge" and "From Garage Startup to Luxury Empire." The publicity was worth more than any marketing campaign I could have funded, driving traffic to my website and generating wholesale inquiries from retailers who wanted to capitalize on the viral moment. But the personal consequences were more complicated and painful than I had anticipated. The next morning, my entire family arrived at the Meridian's offices demanding what they called a family meeting. Marlene was still furious about what she saw as a deliberate humiliation, insisting that I had orchestrated the entire revelation to ruin her wedding day. She demanded that I somehow fix the embarrassment by issuing public statements or paying for damage control. Frank and Georgia seemed caught between pride in my unexpected success and embarrassment about their years of dismissive treatment. They attempted various forms of damage control, suggesting that they had always believed in my potential and that their concerns had been about the uncertainty of entrepreneurship rather than my abilities. These revisionist explanations felt hollow, given the documented history of their preferential treatment toward Marlene. The most unexpected development was Richard's response to the entire situation. Rather than supporting his new wife's outrage, he seemed genuinely fascinated by my business story and asked detailed questions about my growth strategies, investment partnerships, and expansion plans. During private conversations away from Marlene, he admitted that he was reevaluating what he thought he knew about success and family dynamics. 3 weeks after the wedding, Richard requested a private meeting at my office. He explained that the viral nature of the wedding incident had prompted him to research my company more thoroughly, and he was impressed by what he had discovered. My revenue figures, employee count, and international expansion plans represented the kind of authentic business growth that his finance background trained him to recognize and respect. More troubling was his admission that Marlene's behavior during and after the wedding had revealed character traits he hadn't previously recognized. Her treatment of venue staff, her inability to handle public embarrassment with grace, and her immediate assumption that my success was somehow an attack on her had made him question fundamental compatibility issues in their relationship. The legal threats that Marlene had initially made about suing for wedding day embarrassment were quietly dropped after consultation with actual attorneys who explained that I had provided exactly the services contracted for, and that her family relationship to me was irrelevant to the business transaction. Her lawyers also pointed out that any lawsuit would only generate additional negative publicity for her while providing more positive exposure for my business. 6 months later, the long-term consequences were becoming clear. My business had grown by 40%, driven partly by the viral publicity, but mostly by the expanded market opportunities that owning the Meridian had created. We were booking events 18 months in advance, and I had opened negotiations to purchase 2 additional luxury venues in Boston and Miami. My relationship with my parents had evolved into something more honest but less close. They made awkward attempts to invest in my business retroactively, offering to contribute capital that I no longer needed while clearly hoping to claim some credit for my success. I politely declined their financial offers but remained open to rebuilding our relationship on terms of mutual respect rather than traditional family hierarchy. The most dramatic consequence was the deterioration of Marlene's marriage. The wedding day revelation had exposed fundamental differences in values between her and Richard, differences that became impossible to ignore during their first year of marriage. Marlene's spending habits, her treatment of service workers, and her inability to acknowledge her sister's legitimate success created ongoing tension that couples therapy couldn't resolve. Richard filed for divorce 18 months after the wedding, citing irreconcilable differences, but privately acknowledging that the viral wedding incident had been a catalyst for recognizing deeper incompatibilities. The prenuptial agreement they had signed limited Marlene's financial settlement, leaving her with significantly less wealth than she had expected to gain through marriage. But perhaps the most significant change was in my own perspective on success and family relationships. The viral moment had taught me that external validation, even positive validation, was less satisfying than I had imagined it would be. The real satisfaction came from building something meaningful, employing people who could support their families through their work at my company, and creating experiences that brought joy to couples celebrating the most important days of their lives. I had started making candles to light my own way forward, and somewhere along the journey, I had learned that the brightest light comes not from proving others wrong, but from building a life so fulfilling that their opinions simply stop mattering. 3 years have passed since that October wedding at the Meridian, and the ripple effects continue to shape all of our lives in ways none of us could have predicted. My business empire now includes 5 luxury wedding venues across the Northeast, a candle and lifestyle brand distributed in over 2,000 retail locations worldwide, and a business mentorship program that has helped launch 43 female-owned startups. The numbers that once seemed impossible are now simply quarterly reports. Annual revenue exceeds $50 million. My company employs over 300 people, and Forbes featured me on their cover as one of the top self-made women entrepreneurs under 35. The garage where I started 9 years ago has been converted into a small museum at my parents' house, though they seem uncertain whether to feel proud or embarrassed when visitors ask about my humble beginnings. My family relationships have settled into a new equilibrium based on mutual respect rather than traditional hierarchies. Frank and Georgia made genuine efforts to apologize for their years of dismissive treatment, and while our relationship will never return to childhood closeness, we found a way to interact as adults who care about each other despite past mistakes. They've learned to ask about my business with genuine interest, rather than condescending concern, and I've learned to forgive without forgetting the lessons their treatment taught me. The mentorship program has become my most personally rewarding project. Working with young women who face the same dismissive attitudes I encountered reminds me why representation matters and why success stories need to be shared. When a 24-year-old brings me a business plan that her family calls unrealistic, I see my younger self and remember how desperately I needed someone to believe in my potential. Marlene's life took a different trajectory after her divorce. The settlement left her financially comfortable but not wealthy, and the viral nature of our wedding confrontation made dating in New York social circles more complicated than she had anticipated. She moved to California for a fresh start, taking a marketing position with a tech company, and beginning what she describes as a journey of personal growth and self-reflection. To my surprise, she reached out to me last year through a carefully worded email that acknowledged her past behavior and expressed genuine admiration for what I had built. We've exchanged a few messages since then, tentative steps toward rebuilding a relationship that may never be close, but could perhaps be respectful. She admitted that the viral wedding moment, while embarrassing at the time, had forced her to examine her own values and priorities in ways that ultimately led to positive changes. Richard occasionally sends business development opportunities my way, and we've maintained a cordial professional relationship that completely avoids discussing his brief marriage to my sister. His respect for my business acumen has led to several profitable partnerships, proving that some relationships can survive family drama if they're built on mutual professional interest rather than personal obligations. The Meridian itself has become more than I ever imagined when I first walked through its elegant rooms as a potential buyer. It's not just a venue anymore, but a symbol of possibility for young entrepreneurs who visit and hear the story of how it came to be owned by someone who started with $500 and a dream that everyone else called unrealistic. During quiet moments in my office looking out at Central Park through the same windows where I watched Marlene arrive for her wedding 3 years ago, I reflect on the journey that brought me here. The girl who mixed her first candles in a suburban garage couldn't have imagined owning multiple businesses employing hundreds of people, or having her story inspire others to pursue their own impossible dreams. But she also couldn't have imagined that success would bring such clarity about what really matters. The approval I once craved from my family seems less important now than the approval I've learned to give myself. The validation I thought I needed from others has been replaced by the satisfaction of building something meaningful that extends beyond personal achievement. The candles I make now light celebrations for thousands of couples every year, creating the ambiance for proposals, weddings, anniversaries, and other moments when people choose to believe in love, despite all evidence that relationships are complicated and difficult. There's something poetic about starting with candles and ending up in the business of illuminating love stories. Success, I've learned, isn't about proving anyone wrong or getting revenge for past dismissals. It's about becoming so completely yourself that other people's limitations stop defining your possibilities. It's about building something so fulfilling that you no longer need external validation to know your worth. That night at the Meridian taught me something crucial about success and family. Real success isn't about proving people wrong or getting revenge. It's about building a life so fulfilling that their opinions simply don't matter anymore. I started with candles to light my own way, and ended up illuminating the truth about what family really means. Sometimes the family that matters most is the one you create through your work, your values, and your choices. And sometimes the best revenge is simply living well enough that you no longer need revenge at all. What do you think makes a family truly supportive? Have you ever had to choose between family approval and following your dreams? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because I love hearing your stories of overcoming doubt and building success on your own terms. Don't forget to like this video. If my story resonated with you, subscribe for more stories about turning setbacks into comebacks, and share this with anyone who needs a reminder that other people's limitations don't have to become your reality. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that sometimes the best way to light up the world is to first light up your own path. Keep believing in your dreams, even when you're the only one who can see their potential.